Please welcome Associate Professor at the Graduate School of Social Work, Kim Bender.
Thank you very much. I really like your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Last month, I went to a research conference, our annual conference in Washington, D.C., and I was there for 5 days. And at the end of the 5 days, I took a long flight back, and I got on the shuttle to go out to the Pikes Peak parking lot. I don't know if any of you have parked there. It's far. And I was looking for my 2000 Passat, and I finally found it, and I sat down in the front seat, and I sunk down, totally exhausted and relieved to be home, until I turned the key, and my car wouldn't start. And I was out in the cold and the dark, and I was alone, and I had a moment of panic, and then I snapped into action. And the first thing I thought of were my 2 kids, Grayson and Poppy, who were at home with a babysitter who was waiting for me to get back. So I called my mom, who went over to take care of my kids. And then I texted my husband, who was at a Bronco game, and I complained to him that this was the second time this year that I've been stuck out at DIA with car problems. Then I called our good friends Jill and Chris, who lived down the street, and Chris popped in the car to come pick me up at DIA. And in the meantime, I called my father, because at 39 years old, I still rely on him for AAA. And he sent a tow truck to pick up my car. And this is an example of social capital. It's the idea that we all have networks of people in our lives, and those people offer different types of support. So whether it's informational support like AAA, or tangible support like a ride home, or emotional support like the sad emojis I got via text from my husband, it's a support that made me feel like I had a sense of belonging and a sense of connectedness and a team of people to help me out when I was in need. So social scientists have thought a lot about this fundamental need of belonging. Maslow's hierarchy of need, which we talk about in social work a lot, places it among the 3 most fundamental needs of humans, right along with safety and security and basic needs like food and water. And 20 years of research confirms that the need to belong is fundamental. So we develop social bonds without being paid or forced to do so. We do so as infants, it's instinctual. And when people lack meaningful, close relationships, they're more stressed, they're less healthy, they even die sooner. And that's true across cultures around the world. People they have the ability and the motivation to form close bonds, and these relationships offer protection and resources. Today I'm going to tell you about a population that often lacks this sort of belonging. This is a photograph taken by Gwen, a 21-year-old homeless youth. I was talking to Gwen one day down at the shelter, and we started talking about our weaknesses, and we discovered that we share a weakness of worrying. So I shared that I often worry about my kids, that they'll get into some sort of accident. And Gwen shared with me that she has no one she worries about, just herself. Our assumptions about homeless youth are that they're delinquent, that they run away because they're rebellious or they break some sort of rule. But in fact, the most common reason youth give for running away is extreme abuse and family conflict at home. So 91% of our Denver-based sample reports abuse before they leave home. So a typical story is a kid's in a really tough situation where there's extreme violence at home, and they leave to find anywhere else to stay. So they couch surf with aunts or uncles or friends of family until those situations become too stressful, often violent, and the kid becomes a drain on the resources and is asked to leave. So they turn to the streets, and they think maybe they'll find some relief there, but there they face extreme victimization again. 83% of our sample experience violence on the streets, most often in the form of physical assault by an acquaintance or a stranger. Gwen's caption reads, "I'm the chair, and I'm in the room, and I feel alone. I'm by myself, and no one understands me. The chair is dilapidated, and it's been worn, and that's how I feel. But at the same time, I'm still the chair that's able to stand whenever the weight drags me down." There's been a shift in our understanding about this period of emerging adulthood, which is from about 18 to 24, and it's based on neuroscience that says our brains are continuing to develop all into our mid-20s. So we've started to afford services and benefits to people who we used to just stop at adolescence on into their emerging adulthood. So many people in this audience might be providing their adult children with health insurance, or welcoming them back home, or allowing them to rely on resources long into their mid-20s. And homeless youth who are in the same developmental period have few of these supports. So inherent in this photo is the notion that Gwen must help herself to stand strong alone. Surviving such extreme challenges like abuse and violence, but continuing to find a job, to finish your education, to find housing without the support of a family that most 21-year-olds rely on requires a great deal of perseverance. Gwen is also a trans woman. As many as 35% of homeless youth identify as LGBT, and they discuss leaving home because they're not accepted as they are. Once they're on the streets, they face extreme victimization, rejection, and harassment due to their sexual and gender identity. This photo belongs to Mariah, a 19-year-old homeless youth. Mariah shared this photo of an abandoned building that's near the shelter, and her caption read, "It's a room, it's up the street actually. There's condoms on the ground, there's heroin needles. It was kind of disturbing, but it was kind of emotional, sad at the same time because there are also beds in there, so people were sleeping there." Upon talking further with Mariah, I asked her how she found this place. One evening, she ran out of places to stay, and this was a last resort. The average wait time for transitional housing in Denver is 3 to 6 months, but it can take as long as a year. And while youth are waiting for this housing, they stay in one place, Urban Peak. It's a shelter that houses only 40 youth. So in the winter, they can house up to 50, where they sleep kids and overflow sleeping on mattresses on the cafeteria floor. But at 50, their licensing requirements force them to close their doors. And youth have very few places to stay. They also have to turn them away when they turn 21, and youth are consistently afraid of going to adult shelters where they describe drugs and violence and sexual predators. So they often try to lie about their age in order to stay at the shelter as long as possible. At some point in our relationship, Mariah moved out of the shelter, and I asked her one day where she was staying. And she told me that she was staying with her boyfriend's dad's coworker. A couple weeks later, she was back at the shelter. So without the social capital that many of us take for granted, youth are forced to seek support from strangers. This support is, at best, short-lived, but at worst, it's dangerous, as generous strangers often expect sexual favors for a place to stay. This photo was taken by another youth, Hart. Hart grew up in the system. He spent a great deal of time going in and out of juvenile justice facilities. He was aware that he had a different perspective, and that's why he used this negative exposure in his photo to represent that. He felt distance from others. He felt that no one could really understand the real him. And he was fascinated with superheroes for their ability to be valued for their unique talents. His caption reads, "In my life, I see the world differently than everyone else. It creates a lot of challenges to people because it's hard to communicate." In 2012, Denver passed an urban camping ban. This made it illegal for homeless people to sleep outside in public spaces. Boulder passed a similar ordinance, and shortly after, a man was arrested for sleeping in a sleeping bag in 11-degree weather after having been turned away from a shelter because they had no more open beds. Boulder's ordinance reads that people can be arrested for using any shelter aside from their clothes to protect against the elements. So as a society, we don't want to walk by homeless youth on the sidewalk. It forces us to see a significant need and then to struggle with the fact that we're doing little to address that need. We pass policies that criminalize homelessness so that we can force these people away. This policy, to me, exemplifies lack of belonging. So instead of us saying, "You belong to us and we'll help you get what you need," which, by the way, is less expensive, we instead police and prosecute homeless, and we push them further away. There's no one solution to these problems, but a number of DU researchers are taking promising steps. We've studied quite a bit about where to go for support, where youth go for support, and why they find it difficult to connect with others. For example, my colleague Anda Prince in psychology and I received a federal grant to test an intervention to prevent victimization among homeless youth, so the intervention is successful in teaching them to detect and avoid risks on the streets. As another example, with a grant from DU's Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning, my colleague Anamika Barmanadakari and I, along with a team of master's and doctoral students, some of which I think are here today, are piloting a photo voice intervention, and the photos I share today come from that project. The project aims to build social connectedness and self-efficacy among homeless youth, and then to join them back with the broader community. So we provide youth with cameras, and then we send them out to capture their world and to share issues that are important to them. The Youth Voice Project ends in an exhibit where the youth get to share their voices with the community. At our last event, we had 80 people pack into the Molecule Effect Cafe, which is down in Denver's Art District. We had legislative representatives, we had agency board members, we had DU faculty and students attend, we had members of the arts and activist community come out to see youth's photos and hear their voices. It was powerful. Photos from this event capture the community members' experiences, connection, and understanding. I'll end with this final photo of the exhibit. Here, Gwen and Mariah and Hart share their photos and experiences. For the exhibit, youth wrote their own speeches, and I'll share you some of Mariah's. She says, "I may be homeless. Don't judge me. I'm also a poet, a photographer, a soon-to-be graduate, and an intelligent, smart, kind, funny, and outgoing person." You can see on their faces a sense of pride. But to me, the most important part of this photo is the background. In this image, the youth are surrounded by a community of people who care about them, what they have to say, and what happens for them next. In this moment, these youth feel a sense of belonging in society, a fundamental human need. Thank you.